Great morning, world. Great morning, humans. This is your boy, Dr. JC, and welcome to another episode of the Make Sense with Dr. JC Doornick podcast. This is our live edition, and that would be called Make Sense Mondays. And it's something that I've been doing for about 700 years now. So great morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. What we do on Mondays is we do a live version of this, of our podcast. It gets cleaned up and the podcast episode is there. But this is your opportunity to interact and show up to this show live. And I'm all for just love, whether it's live interacting right now as people start to come in. Just love the idea of people asking me questions, challenging me, saying good things, saying bad things. Any form of interaction is welcome. I'm just completely wide open and curious to learn from everything and everyone, and that will lend to this topic today. So today's topic for Make Sense Monday is called As If. And if you look at those two words, we're saying that as if is what we call a sense-making utility. One of the things that I love to do is I love to arm and equip people with tools and utilities that they can use in the interface with reality today, and whatever it is that your goals and dreams are, whatever it is that you interface with today. I love to arm and equip people with different vantage points, different perceptions and different tools to get a more favorable outcome. Just to give you a real simple idea is if you walk up and there is a nail that needs to be nailed into a 2x4, it would be great to have a hammer at that point, wouldn't it? So we're going to arm you and equip you with a bunch of stuff with this rise up today. So say hi to a couple of people chiming in. I say great morning to you, Susan. Great morning to everybody that is joining us live. And like I said, please feel free to comment. Every now and then, people like to challenge me and either ask a thought-provoking question or even challenge me and in some way, shape, or form, challenge my credibility or something like that. God, I love it all. I just love any sort of interaction with humans. Because what's fun about interacting with humans is being able to step out of the interaction. Here's a tool for you, and just acknowledge the conscious levels of people. I always said, forgive them for they know not what they do. But man, is that a power move for you to be able to recognize that somebody's thinking, saying, or doing something, and it really doesn't have anything to do with you. Great morning, Lindsay. Good to see everybody. Feel free to share this away with people. This is going to be a good one. Great morning, Chris. Good to see everybody. So let's get started with this, and we'll give thanks to some of our sponsors and our affiliates. All of the work that I do, I'm 53 years old right now, the Dragon, and all of the work that I do and that I have done and that I am doing is all being compiled in one place. Great morning, Deb. All being compiled in one place. This is my passion project, potentially my swan song, where I'm going to take everything that I've ever learned and continue to learn, all my coursework, all my business coaching, all my mentoring, everything, and putting it all under one roof in a private community hosted on the school platform. We call it the Make Sense Academy. And coupled with a new project called the Make Sense Business Academy, where we're dealing with all of the headspace based on who you are determines how well what you do works. And also this concept of if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So everything that you're going to hear from me here, if you like it and you like the idea of rewiring your brain, becoming the dominant force and shot caller and author of your new story, there's a process for that. We have a process of taking members that come in, putting them through something where they learn this verbiage and this 4-step process called the interface response system. And we start to decide where we're going to go and why, and look how to protect our goals and dreams. And then, and only then, can you take these tools and utilities that we're giving everybody to succeed with and succeed? Because it's who you are that determines how well what you do works. If you're out there and you're working your tushy off and just not seeing the ball move forward, it might not be the structure. It might just be that you're not the right person for the job yet. So come on in, check out the Make Sense Academy. Somebody asked me the other day and they said, how much does it cost to work with you? How much does it cost to mentor with you? And I said, $48 a month. And that price will never go up once you're in. The price is going up at the end of the year, but and anything and everything that we ever do is you're welcome. I also want to give a shout out to my buddy Jim Quick at quicklearning.com. Another precursor to your success. This is something the Make Sense Academy and Make Sense podcast is very adamant about, this idea of there's some steps that must be taken before you go out into the arena of play and be effective. So by learning how to memorize things and work on the process of learning how to learn, right? That's what Jim Quick teaches you. He has this memory course and he teaches you how to speed read. I've been reading one book a week now for years and years and years. So my brain, your brain, just like a computer, is reprogrammable. So just want to give a shout out to Quick Learning. Everybody in the Make Sense Academy is going to be very excited to find out that Jim is coming and doing a live training for us. I just spoke to him yesterday, and that training is going to go over memory retention and also all of his stuff and his speed reading. And it will be one of the cheapest places that you could ever find access to his courses. So if you're a Jim Quick fan, come check it out. All right. So let's get into this rise up today. We call it as if, and then in parentheses, we say a sense making utility. So I'm reading a book right now, and I'll share this book in the comments. This is a fascinating book by Hans Vaihinger, I think Vaihinger, and it's called The Philosophy of As If. So a lot of the stuff that I'm getting today comes from that book. I don't make this stuff up. I just make up my version of it. So this book, as I said, is called The Philosophy As If. It uncovers something really, really exciting. This is a little bit of a feather ruffler today, but if you grasp this, if you become open and curious to this, you're going to have an amazing, amazing day. So what it uncovers is the reality that most everything that we believe, this is tough when we challenge beliefs. I know that I don't like to have my beliefs challenged, but almost everything, I would even say everything that we believe to be true is in some way, shape, or form something that has been made up and represents some sort of myth and idea that we have been taught to embrace as something that was true, as if it were true. So just imagine entertaining the idea that anything that you think is fact or true, that you have an exclamation point behind, and that includes everything, your core values, your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, your beliefs about good and evil, and all of that stuff. What if you were able to go back into the depths of your brain and recognize that there's no true validity behind any of it, but you've been taught to embrace it as if it were the truth, and then recognize that that very idea of embracing something that has no factual, truth behind it, as if it were the truth, using that as a utility. So that's what this is. It would be a utility, something that you would use to help you create some sort of an order of the underlying chaos of reality. Now, what's interesting about that is we do need order. We do need some sort of a way of creating order and making sense of things. Heck, that's what I teach people how to do, is to make sense of things. But the question is does anything really make sense? Or are we just using some of these things that we've learned, these skill sets, and we're going to uncover them as a means of making sense of it all? But underlying that, does it actually make sense? Do we even need to make sense of a potentially unsensical world? So this is an enormously powerful conversation that lends to so many things, including the concept that I speak often about the simulation hypothesis. This is something that recognizes that there is less than a 1% chance that we are not living in some sort of a simulation. So there's an example of something that you would either entertain because there's less than a 1% chance that it's not true, or you would grab onto that 1% and say, I'm sticking to my guns, right? And that would be the idea with a simulation hypothesis, that we're in some sort of matrix-like world that's, full of fabricated, illusions that are presented to us as if they were reality itself, that we're living in some sort of a video game. I just think it's so comical that right now the hottest topic is that humans are creating artificial intelligence when we have no proof at all that we, in fact, are not artificial intelligence, but that's been built by somebody else, so it's like we just keep rinsing and repeating. Anyway, so those two words are so incredibly powerful for us today, and those are as if. What it does is it brings to light that humans have this fascinating ability, and that's you and I. I'm human as well, as far as I know, whatever that means. But we have this fascinating ability to take things that we know to be false. We can take something that we know to be false, or something that doesn't have any proof, and accept them as if they were true, just as a means of making sense of things. So think about how many things that you claim with an exclamation point are true. And what I'm saying is we have the ability to know that they're not true, but still believe that they're true. Now, what's cool about that, if you want to become the dominant force of your life, what you can do today is recognize that you can believe in whatever you want to believe in. So whenever somebody approaches me with a belief that is not akin to mine, I don't have any desire at all to challenge them on that, because all I'm hearing is somebody that has decided to believe in something. Wouldn't that be an interesting way for you to communicate with people? Is just be in full radical acceptance that what somebody is saying is what they believe. Very often people challenge my beliefs, but I never challenge anybody's beliefs. I just ask them, is that right? Is that right? And if you say yes to that question, then it is. Then it is. Because at the end of the day, we believe in whatever we want to believe in. But the question is it a forward-moving structure for you? And have you ever looked under the hood of your beliefs? Because if you did, you would recognize that there's no wires connecting to them, right? They're for the most part made up. So it's the ultimate form of disregard that human beings have, the ultimate form of disregard. And that's this capability of, allowing ourselves to have this thing run on autopilot deep inside our operating system. And it carries so much power that you're actually convinced that it's true. It would be the equivalent of seeing some sort of mechanical device talking to you. Like, I remember I could have sworn when I was in college that I had this parrot that, like, you'd say something and it would respond to you. We were probably partying a little too much that night, but I could have sworn that it said something to me, and I looked and there were no batteries in it, right? How do you make sense of that? So if you look deep inside your operating system and you see that there's no fact, or there's no wires connecting to what it is that you're saying, but you still have the ability to be convinced that it's true, that is a very powerful thing that human beings have. And when you make up your mind about something, that's what is. So what have you made your mind up about? So this is very common in this world. It's a very, very big challenge. So what whatever you think is right ends up being right. So, what do you ever get for being right? That's what I always love to say. And then some people will hear this right now. And I know this because I get the feedback, and they'll go, "You're crazy. This podcast is nonsense." I get that a lot, right? The Make Sense podcast. And they say, "This is nonsense." And what's funny about that is when I hear people say, "This is nonsense," or if I'm in a conversation and somebody said, "This is nonsense," I always say, "I agree with you. I agree with you that this is nonsense." But what I mean by that is it doesn't make sense to consider this idea that I'm talking about, right? That everything has been made up, right? It doesn't make sense to consider this if you're using the operating system that we've been handed over by others that care not to look at it either. So that's a big move. When we teach the interface response system, we just acknowledge that most of what we believe, what we perceive, which ends up being how we interact and interface with the world, has been programmed into our brain by others. And have you ever stopped to wonder if they were right in what it is that they taught us? Because remember, as a child in the formative years, you don't have any say in what is. You just accept it and your brain wires it, neurons that fire together wire together. So your belief system, it really isn't your belief system. But have you ever stopped to ask where that belief system started? Who made that up and were they right? Now, that would challenge things like faith and things like that. So I get why you don't do it. But in this space right now, if you're open and curious with me, who knows? So I agree with people that say, so you have two choices with my podcast, with my stuff here, because it is pretty deep. You can either take the blue pill, like in the Matrix, and just carry on with whatever it is that you believe today. Or you can allow yourself to come with me and take the red pill today and entertain the idea. And just think about what that sounds. Entertain the idea. If you're at a place in your life where you cannot entertain an idea, think about that. Think about that. That would be you claiming that everything that you know and believe, everything is the end all, which I can't prove that it's not. But without opening yourself to entertain any other vantage point or any other perspective, if you're okay with that, then this is not the right podcast for you. But the red pill is what I invite you guys to take with me today. And that is just to entertain this idea that there's something that you kind of inherently know is true, right? That's why we take the blue pills, because we don't want to even entertain the red pill. That's why people stay away from people that say things that are contrary to what you believe. We actually eradicate them. We call it cognitive bias. We will only hang out with people that agree with us, and anybody else is the enemy. Why would we do that? What if the enemy has something credible to say? Well, if your house of cards is teetering right now, and remember that kid that like breathes too much and he knocks your house of cards down, that's that enemy. So you got to get them out of there, or open yourself up to a breakthrough today. So how many days, and this is the theory that I use, how many days do you have left to make this decision about the red pill or the blue pill, to explore or not? Right? Oh, that's right. We don't know how many days, right? So why don't you wake up to that today? And I'm just going to assume that you're going to allow yourself to come explore, whether you're watching this live or you're watching this as a recording. And just always chime in and ask me questions in the live. They won't show up in the cleaned up version, but let us know where you're coming from, what you think, anything like that. Anything goes. But we're gonna just see what this is all about now. So this is a good time. In order to give this a little bit of color, I'm going to help you better understand things. This would be an appropriate time for me to share with you a concept that comes from Chinese Sanskrit known as Dharma Dhatu. So Dharma is Dharma, Dhatu is Dhatu. So Dharma has many, many meanings in Sanskrit. And one of the primary things that it means is it's Dharma refers to your doctrine or method of function. So everybody has Dharma. So you're the kind of like the Dharma officer of your life. Okay. And Dhatu, Dhatu, means it refers to the realm or the world. So let's just, for the sake of this conversation, collectively say that what Dharma Dhatu means, this Chinese Sanskrit saying, the function of the whole universe, the way of things, which is also known as the Tao. Okay. Where you get the idea that the universe, this is what we're entertaining today with the red pill. You get the idea that the universe is one of looking at everything in relation and relevance to everything else, right? That's the way we would look at the universe, is that we look at everything and its relation to everything else. And the reason why we have to do that is because nothing exists without something else. And I'll give you some examples of that. Without motion, there could be no stillness. How would you know stillness if you didn't know motion? You get the idea? Dark would give rise to the light. If you never knew darkness, you would never know light. They're both omnipresent and equally important. One path can only exist in life in relation to other motions and other paths. How would you know that you're on the right path if you didn't know that there were other paths? So it reminds me also of this other term called Wu Wei. Watch what I look like when I say that. Wu Wei. WU and then in hyphen WEI. Wu Wei. And what that is another ancient Chinese word that means not to act or effortless action. So it's a core principle of Taoism, and it's the central thing to this idea of the Tao, which means the way of things. What it brings to light, and this is the reason why I shared this with you today. Great morning, Lori. What it brings to light is this. It brings to light this theory that nothing in the world can act by itself. Now, with me right now, you probably are in agreement of that. That I just showed you dark to light, motion, no motion, stillness, right? So right now you're saying, yes, this is correct. Nothing in this world can act by itself. There is no such thing as a sole agent that acts by itself until you start thinking about yourself. Right? You might be in this place where you can see that we're all connected, but in this space right now, if you can just take a look and recognize that you have been indoctrinated into this idea that you are separate and unique from everyone else. But when we look at the universe as an ecosystem, you recognize that nothing can exist without other things. But when it comes to you, can you see that you think you're separate and unique? Your life experience is separate and unique from anyone else. And I'll show you why that's important, but also our demise. Rather than, all things, are acting in one, all things are in one state of universal agency with all things. Agency means control. Everything is in cahoots with everything else. One overall governing agency in one overall ecosystem of sorts. This is what we're entertaining right now. Because if you come down this is the red pill. If you go down this hill with me right now, you're going to see that you're not separate and unique from anyone. And that's an important distinction for this conversation. All things are part of one thing, the same thing. We all come from the same thing. However, this would be far too confusing. This is where we move into this making sense of things. It would be far too confusing and potentially threatening to consider this for humans, right? It doesn't allow us to control things. We like to control things. Sometimes people will challenge something that I said and tell me that in some way, shape, or form, they disagree. Just look at the nature of that conversation. If somebody tells me that something I said they don't agree with, what they're saying is they're saying, I have a different opinion. And my response to that is, yes, because I'm open to hearing all opinions. And I was just sharing my thoughts of the day, right? And then what I'll hear is they will share their opinion and they'll express their thoughts and feelings about that opinion. So I'll understand why they have that opinion. And then I will say something like, thank you for sharing. And then what I'll see is they're still upset with what I said. And in that moment, unconsciously, what they don't know is that they're trying to control what I think. They don't want me to just understand them. They want me to feel like them. So this is interesting behavior. And if you start to observe this stuff and learn how to control it and not let it set you off, like some people get set off, that's going to be favorable, right? So we have all these theories, philosophies, and religious beliefs, right? And if you start to understand what I'm saying here, the danger in it would be that it would dissolve them all. It would dissolve them all if you really looked under the covers, and we have this ability to construct, like I said, it's like looking at an engine that has no wires to it. your brain has the ability to actually come up with some sort of an explanation of how it's still an engine, right? As if it were true. So that's what this is about. So therefore, starting at birth, we must learn. This is how we cope with this incredibly confusing world that we live in. If you looked at the truth, and the truth is that we don't know anything. So we learn, from birth that we in the formative years, we must have ways to better make sense of things. That's why our parents and our mother, father, teacher, preacher teach us everything, is they're arming and equipping us to make sense of an unsensible world. So we learn to pretend. That's what we're doing, to pretend that certain things are a certain way, not because they actually are, but more, as I said, a utility to help us make sense of things. So your belief system ends up being like a tool that you use to help you make sense of things and create order around things where there is nothing but disorder. And I'll share with you why this is important. So, not too different from me taking these topics that I'm giving you right now and attempting each morning to translate these topics, as I'm doing right now, in a way that you'll better make sense of them. That's what I'm doing. Is I'm taking this philosophy right now and I'm trying to translate it in a way that you'll better understand it. So we're always trying to do this. We're always trying to simplify things. In fact, the whole idea of making sense of things in general is taking things that are extraordinary and abnormal and like confusing and complex and simplifying them with our programmed operating system and our language and all of that stuff. Our current sense making machine is making all the decisions right now. But stop right now and say, where did I get it? Where did I get it? So here are some things that we must, these are interesting things. Here are some things that we've learned to accept that give us the ability to communicate with one another. We had to actually learn these made up things in order for us to communicate and have order, right? With one another. And they're fabricated. They're all fabricated. So, and I'm not like a conspiracy theorist here, right? I'm just a sense maker, and I just love to look at things. I like to turn over rocks, and I like to look under the hood at things. And if you do that, there's no conspiracy here. The conspiracy is this idea that we think we know everything. One of the greatest moves I ever made was recognizing that that was not the case. I let go of that idea. So here are some things that we've been led to believe that we're pretending are true, that all things are separate and unique to themselves. I mentioned this before. So in order to talk about and describe the various components of the universe, we must break it down into units rather than acknowledge the fact that everything is connected as one. Look at the hat. We are one, right? Rather than doing that to create order, we break it down into units. And what that does is it allows us to believe that things are like, things like obstacles and events are things that happen to us. And we always share about how things don't happen to us, they happen for us. But that's not the way the majority of the world looks at things, right? We have to look at things as separate from us. And that gives us the ability to blame other things for our circumstances. And that also validates, this idea of blaming, but more importantly, removal of responsibility from things. You see why that's important, to be able to get out of trouble, as if they were outside from us. Mistakes of fortune or something like that, outside mistakes of fortune. So the second belief that we have to kind of buy into is that we're all separate and unique agents as humans, right? Even though we know that all the data shows right now, and I don't believe in all the data, but all the data that we have shows that we all come from the same source, right? So here's that idea of creating wires where there are none. We all come from the same source. But what we've learned to do is to pretend that we are separate and unique forms of agency. We're all separately in control of our own lives. We say things in personal growth like taking radical responsibility for your life and all of that stuff. So we completely buy into that idea. And there's a reason why we buy into it. So you and I are unique and in control of our own path and destiny. And in fact, we spend our whole lives trying to figure out what that is, right? Our own path and destiny. So it's easier to comprehend that way. It would be so confusing to look at somebody else doing something and recognize that in some way, shape, or form, I'm doing that too, because we're all connected. But if we separate one another, right, think about how important it is. Otherwise, I would have to acknowledge that my success or my demise is yours and vice versa. That would suck, wouldn't it? How inconvenient would it be to acknowledge that is probably true? Because we're all connected. We're all come from the same thing. It's as if we're growing apart from one another and becoming so unique. We're all connected. We're all the same. It also helps us create things like law and order in the land, making us all responsible for our own actions as if they were separate and unique actions from all other actions. So that's something right there that we have to kind of like believe, and it's a utility to help us create order. But it doesn't mean it's true, right? That's what we're entertaining. So the third is rewards and punishments. We made that up. The idea of rewarding good behavior and punishing bad behavior. This is a really interesting one that we made up, right? And it helps us in many ways, but it's also our demise. The reward for regarding oneself as a superpower, right? An agent, you can do anything that you put your mind to, is useful to us as it keeps us in motion. Right? You can do anything you set your mind to. So all of a sudden you buy into that idea because that's what you were taught at a very young age. And you start to be in forward motion as a result of it. That could be a great thing. This is the birthplace and job opportunity for the ego. This is your ego's job. If you didn't have this desire to move forward, your ego would have no role at all. So this has its benefits, as I said, obviously. However, the challenge with this is that the person that becomes hypnotized by the future will never actually have the opportunity to enjoy life where it actually is taking place, and that is the present moment. We speak a lot about that. So when they get where they're going, if you're hypnotized by this idea that we always have to be in motion, and that's the rewards and punishment concept, right? You're going to get rewarded for being in forward motion. When we get where we're going to go, we're just going to continue looking forward and miss the stop and celebrate portion and acknowledgement of what we've accomplished. Now, punishments, on the other hand, come in various forms. Those we know, like from our mother, father, teacher, preacher, as a means of forcing us to conform to the ways that they conform to. So that's the passing of the baton. But we begin to regard things like disease and death or injuries as forms of punishment as well. This is a really fascinating thing, that if we get sick or if somebody dies or we find out we're going to die or we get hurt, those are forms of punishment, right? Especially in religious realms, right? It's like you brought that on yourself, triggering thoughts that you are some sort of a victim of circumstance or unlucky. We say, why me, God? We look up at the sky and say, why me, God? Who made that up? Who made that up? What did I do to deserve this? Heaven and hell would be the ultimate example of this, this potential deception of punishment that has left a permanent mark. That's a permanent mark on that, right? Because that's one where we have completely, enough people believed in heaven and hell, where we've completely bought into this idea that that's a non-negotiable one. Of course it's negotiable. Everything's negotiable when you start becoming ultimately conscious. Now that's one that's going to ruffle feathers, because that one's holding up your house of cards, right? Good versus evil. But why wouldn't you entertain the validity behind that and just acknowledge something that you've bought into? Why wouldn't you? Well, it's scary. It's scary. So even people that claim to be atheists, which is a religion, right, still have some sort of fear of being inappropriate or sinning in some sort of a way, right? So we come to feel that that we really are separate things and responsible for what we do. So our ego takes control as we know it all, right? Our ego knows everything and it will protect it with fists clenched, right? We are kept in order while living by the law of policemen, but then we also have to live the law of the celestial police that are waiting for us at the other side of the pearly gates, waiting to judge us after we die. How about that? How about that? How about the person or people that put that into place and said, you better be a good boy because you're not just being policed here. You go to jail, but there's an even bigger jail. You can't even get in, right? From the celestial police. They're waiting for you. So these are all things that were fabricated to help us create order. And I get it. And I get it. And I've lived that way most of my life. So is that fact? No. That's where this conversation is. The red pill, the open and curious person allows themselves to say, well, I still believe it and it's what I have faith in, but it's not fact, right? There's no wires connecting to it. But you can join me in addressing that the things that you call facts are not either, right? There's no fact. It's not even a fact that I'm saying it's not a fact. And right now people are saying like, where are we going with this? I'll tell you. But we're just embracing things as if they were true in order to have some sort of order of things to use in our attempt to make sense of ourselves and things in the world. Yes, it would be a whole lot easier to just shut your mind off to this awareness right now. That would be the easy thing to do, to just look at me as the enemy, consider somebody that's talking about something radical as blasphemy or whatever. That would be the easy route to do. And that would be what the majority would do because it's easy. It's easy. And we see this happening everywhere. And I understand how we have to have order. I get it. It would be a whole lot easier. Tuck it under the rug. But just remember, when you tuck things under the rug, it leaves a lump in the rug. And it's always visible. And it's always going to be there as the clock starts ticking. You're always going to know. You're always going to wonder what else there is to acknowledge. What does this mean for you and I today? That's what I like to do, is give you something you can do. What value does it have to allow yourself to just entertain and acknowledge these obvious inconsistencies that exist and incongruencies? What does it matter to allow yourself to acknowledge inconsistencies and incongruencies? So in my current reality, just see how I use this, I'm open and curious about this stuff as it seems a whole lot more interesting than just pretending the world is the way it has been fed to me to acknowledge. For me, it's way more interesting to actually become open and curious to all things, including what you have to say. That's fascinating for me. So you could take a small step today, just to give you an idea of a small step today, and allow yourself to just admit that things seem to be a certain way. When you acknowledge something that you are saying is, you could just switch that to say it seems to be that way. Because when you say the word seems, it means that's just the way I'm perceiving it. Doesn't mean it is. That's a step, rather than ignore the fact and just call it the way, right? The absolute. Most people are going to do that today. Most people wouldn't listen to this. The people that listen to my podcast are fascinated. They're seekers. They're not looking to discount what it is that they believe, but they're allowing themselves to look at everything, which is a great way to live. Or you can acknowledge that it doesn't make sense, any of this stuff, and we can't do anything about it. It's too much work. And perhaps that paralysis, that strategy is a way for some of you. I get it. Out of sight, out of mind. Or what a great word, or maybe, or perhaps the way is to not take yourself so seriously today. Perhaps that's the burden of all of these things that we've been led to believe, is that we take ourselves so darn seriously not in a socially immature way. I'm not saying go throw bricks through windows, right? That is in no way, shape, or form my belief system. Not in a socially immature way and in a careless manner, but in a socially mature way, like that of like the philosophy of Zen Buddhism or something like that, where there is a recognition. It's just a recognition of these incongruencies, inconsistencies, and this potential deception and as ifness that gives you an inward relief and releases you from the burden of society. Think about the burden you've placed on yourself in society and how that is having an impact on you. Not to get rid of the conventional way of thinking, but treat it lightly. Treat your conventional way of thinking lightly, more so to be unconventional. That would be my offering to you today, to be unconventional. Is it okay to be unconventional? And I'll point one thing out in closing. Show me one amazing breakthrough in science, technology, or even anyone that's ever won the Nobel Prize theory, right? Winning theory that has changed the world that came from inside the box and a conventional way of thinking. All of the advancements that we are so enamored by have come from unconventional, outside the box thinking. They did not go with the flow. They stepped outside. So logic would say red pill every now and then, maybe just one. You could take 2 blue pills today, but take 1 red pill. Join our unconventional group if you're interested in accelerated growth and experience the growth that you know exists in all of us. Make sense? So love and appreciate you. Today was longer. It was 40 minutes, but I got excited about it. Love and appreciate you. Have an amazing day. Come check out the Make Sense Academy, risk-free. What we're doing is we're allowing people to explore their genius, explore what their purpose is, what the meaning of life is, and put themselves in a place as a dominant force and shot caller and creator of their life, where the things that they do start to have more impact. So you start to get more results. And yes, that means make more money as well, if that's interesting to you. There's a version of you that can kick ass at everything. And that's what we're looking to unveil in the Make Sense Academy, Make Sense Business Academy. Love and appreciate you. Have an amazing day. We'll see you next time.